there, Jody here, and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I'm going to be giving a spoiler review on the latest book that I have read. So in my spoiler reviews, I go over certain things, like always, such as what the book is about, if I've read from this author before or not, my thoughts on the book, my star rating, and if this is a book I would recommend reading. So without any further ado, let's get on to today's spoiler free book review, and that will be for the book Once More with Feeling by Elissa Sussman. So Once More with Feeling is about Kathleen Rosenberg, who at one point in time was known to the world as Katie Rose, the super popular, successful, and talented pop star. It was during that time that Kathleen was dating Ryan Lanieve of the boy band Crush Zone. Together, the two were pop star royalty. But at the height of Kathleen's career and popularity, she ends up losing everything in the blink of an eye when word about Kathleen being romantically linked to Cal Kirby, one of Ryan's bandmates from Crush Zone, comes out. The fallout from the cheating scandal for Kathleen was devastating, completely destroying her public image and career. Years go by, and Kathleen's life couldn't be more different than the one she lived as pop star Katie Rose. Kathleen lives a simple, quiet, drama-free life far away from the public eye in New York City. As much as Kathleen likes her life now, there's still a part of her that misses the life she once had. When Kathleen's best friend tells her that she wrote a musical with her in mind for the lead, Kathleen jumps at the chance to be a part of the show. Kathleen's excitement, though, is short-lived when she finds out that the director of the show will be none other than Cal Kirby. There was a time when Kathleen and Cal were as close as two people could possibly be. Although after their cheating scandal became known, the two had a falling out and haven't seen or spoken to each other since. Cal is the last person that Kathleen wants to be around, but she doesn't want to let him get in the way of her career comeback. The more time that Kathleen spends around Cal, though, the more she feels her old feelings for him start to resurface. So this is the first book by Elissa Sussman that I've read, and I'd be open to reading from this author again. The next book by this author that I would want to read would be Funny You Should Ask, which is a book that I have but have not yet read. And in case you're interested, this author's latest release, Totally and Completely Fine, recently came out this past July. So now for my thoughts on the book. While I overall really did end up liking this book, I did have an issue with this book for the majority of the time that I was reading it. Unlike in my past reviews, I'm going to go over what I didn't like about the book first, and then what I liked after, because what I didn't like about the book is also something that I did like about the book. Confused? If so, everything will make much more sense once I get to my thoughts on the book. The major issue that I have with this book is that this is a romance, and yet the romance was basically non-existent for the first 300 pages of the book. Normally, I don't go over what the tropes are in a romance book that I've read to avoid any spoilers. But this is a romance where you're aware upfront what the tropes in the book are because of what the story is about. So the tropes in the book are friends to enemies to lovers, as well as being a slow burn second chance romance. The story in the book has two separate timelines, one in the past and one in the present. In the past timeline, you get to learn about how Kathleen and Cal first met and how they meet again years later when they are both pop stars. The past timeline also covers when Kathleen and Cal start to fall for each other and how the fallout from the cheating scandal affected Kathleen and Cal differently. In the present day timeline, when Kathleen and Cal meet again, there's a lot of feelings between the two, but not pleasant ones. They try their best to be cordial with one another, but there's a good amount of awkwardness and resentment that's felt because of their past history. Then there's the constant bickering between Kathleen and Cal while they're working on this new musical together. I bring all this up to set up a picture for you for how the romance was presented for most of the story. I'm assuming when Kathleen and Cal meet again in the present day, we're supposed to feel all this underlying tension and assume that the only reason they are constantly arguing back and forth is because of all the passion and feelings they still have for one another. But at the end of the day, you just did not feel the passion, the chemistry, nor the romantic connection between Kathleen and Cal literally at all during the first 300 pages of the book. It was just simply not there, which is definitely a problem because there should be romance in a romance book. Now for what I liked about the book. So the first thing that I really liked was, surprise, surprise, the romance. Now I'm sure you're probably confused by me saying this. Let me explain. While the romance was basically non-existent throughout the first 300 pages of the book, that all changed once you got past that point in the book. After the first 300 pages, the romance fully came to life and got incredibly good. From page 300 until the end of the book, there was finally romance present in this romance book. You finally felt the romantic connection, the passion, and the longing that Kathleen and Cal still had for one another. That was what was so frustrating about reading the first 300 pages of the book when it came to the romance. You could sense that Kathleen and Cal had the potential for chemistry, but that's all it ended up being, potential, nothing more than that. Even though it took a very long time, it was nice to see Kathleen and Cal's chemistry finally come to life later in the book. Another thing that I really liked was the writing. I really like Elissa Sussman's writing. Despite the one issue that I had with the book, this was still a very fun book to read. The writing was very easy to jump into and follow along to, and also had a lot of heart and emotion in it as well. The last thing that I really liked was how the story involved the performing arts, specifically Broadway and theater. As someone who really loves Broadway and theater, I really enjoyed reading about this in the book. There would be times when the characters would be talking about musicals and Broadway shows, and I loved those times so much in the book because it felt like they were speaking my language. I also really loved how the story dealt with what it takes to get a show to Broadway, the auditions, the workshops and rehearsals in New York, the out-of-town tryout, which for the show in the book takes place in Rhode Island, the Broadway previews, and then finally opening night on Broadway. The only thing I was a bit annoyed by when it came to the Broadway show storyline in the book was something that I'm sure nobody reading this book would care about unless you two are a theater nerd like me. When the show that Kathleen and Cal are working on finally comes to Broadway, the story never actually says what theater the show goes to, and I would love to know what theater the show went to. As someone who's been to all but 2 theaters on Broadway, if I were to try and predict what theater the show would have gone to based on, for example, the set design, I would say that the show would have worked best at the Marriott Marquis. So now for my star rating. Despite having an issue with there being no romance in this romance book throughout the first 300 pages, there was still plenty about this book that I really liked and thought was very well done, such as the romance for the last portion of the book, the writing, and how the story involved the performing arts. I kept in mind the things that I didn't like about the book just as much as the things that I did like about the book when it came to my star rating. If I were to base my star rating on the first 300 pages, it would be 3.5. If I were to base my star rating on the last 94 pages, because the book's 394 pages, it would be 5 stars. With all that being said, my overall rating for Once More with Feeling was 4 stars. Now for Is This a Book I Would Recommend Reading? As much as I did end up really liking this book, I can't overlook the fact that the romance in this book took an incredibly long time to appear. Now, I don't mind sticking with a book until it gets good, but I know not everyone is interested in waiting around. So because of that, I will say that there are just better romances out there to pick up and read. That being said, I will never not recommend a book or say it's a book not worth reading because ultimately we all have our own opinions, and what I may like, you may not, and vice versa. Even though this wasn't the best romance I've ever read, I'm still very glad I read it, and I encourage you to pick up the book to read if the story sounds interesting to you because you very well may love it. Okay, so that's going to be it for today. Thank you so very much for watching. I hope I helped you discover a new book today along the way as well, and until next time, bye.